Is it possible to build companies that have really strong values and that live that values and at the same time be competitive? And for me, honestly, this might be one of the first moments and also potentially one of the things that is drawing me to that field. Because I don't think it's possible to solve alignment issues to a certain degree if you don't have a really conscious, a new culture that you didn't need to build iPhones or a tablet, but to align new consciousness, I think so. So for me, there's a huge potential in that.
Welcome to the Soul Awakened Leadership Podcast. Soul Awakened leaders are courageous innovators and pioneers who embody a deep knowing of our interconnectedness and operate from a mindset of co-creation in service to all of life. They surrender their existence completely to a higher organizing principle that is leading them beyond separation and competition and opens up the potential for an entirely new way of being on this planet in a time of metamorphosis. In this podcast, I share cutting-edge perspectives and invite the voices of leaders who don't create followers but inspire others to step into their true power and essence. And in this episode, I'm in conversation with Max Roth. Max bridges the technical background of a physicist with a deep spiritual practice and curiosity for consciousness. His passion for awakening has led him to explore the potential of AI birthing a radically new consciousness in this world, and he very practically supports tech leaders in changing their corporate culture so that they can align their technological developments with the values that support well-being for their employees and humanity at large. In our conversation, we explore how this could lead to massive social innovations and change the systems and games we've been playing in our society for the last centuries. Before we begin, I want to announce that you can still apply for the Soul Awakened Leadership Circle group coaching program that I'm offering again. It is a curated support structure for pragmatic visionaries who are committed to deep inner work while being actively engaged in the world by bringing their gifts fully to the marketplace in service to life. Described by former participants as a deeply transformative experience and something that I haven't really been exposed to ever, this is a group of allies that comes together to uplevel each other for what's to come. If you want to find out more or apply, you can find all the details at soulawakenedleadership.com. And now, let's step into our conversation with Max. Yeah, welcome, Max. Before I start to introduce you, I invite us both to a little grounding and also our listeners and viewers to take a moment to, if you feel like closing your eyes or center yourself, focus inward for a moment, and to just connect with your body. We can allow our breath to guide us a little deeper. And with our in-breath, really allowing our awareness to travel down through our lungs, all the way into our bellies, and to soften these parts a little more, if that's available to us. Feeling our feet on the ground. And creating a bit more inner spaciousness. Giving ourselves conscious permission to let go of anything that has happened already today, anything that will still happen afterwards, and to choose to be fully present here with whatever is alive right now, and to take a moment to just scan our bodies and to observe what is alive right now. Noticing any tensions or contractions where we might be holding, and if it's available to us to soften our shoulders, soften our jaw, soften our legs and our bellies, or any other parts that is still feeling a bit tense. Continuing to breathe naturally and deeply. And in this spaciousness, open ourselves to a space of possibility where we can observe ourselves as we're listening, and creating the possibility to let ourselves be surprised, let ourselves be inspired, and also opening ourselves to the possibility of listening for insight rather than agreement. inviting the possibility that whatever we might hear, even if it's contradicting our worldview, our belief, has the potential to plant seeds, to bring in new information, and to expand our sense of being in this world, really allowing for the paradox to guide us into the mystery so that we can embrace the fullness of life, even if we don't fully agree, but rather than to going into a protective posture of disagreement, opening to the possibility and to attune and to listen to what it is that wants to land with us. Taking a few more breaths into the space of possibility. Feeling our body, feeling our feet in the earth, feeling how we're supported, feeling our resources. And then slowly, when we're ready, we can prepare to come back to the shared space. In our own timing, we can open our eyes again. Yeah, Max, I'm really happy to have you here in this call. I think I first became aware of you and your work through your podcast, Evolving with AI, and the episode that you recorded with Bayo Akamulafe on AI and souls and monsters. And yeah, I really appreciated the depth which you're so courageously looking at the development and implications of AI, and especially when it comes to what it means for consciousness and the evolution on this planet. But what I really admired about the podcast was your capacity to listen deeply. And I almost had the sense that through your emergent listening, you invited another intelligence into the space that wasn't just yours or bios, but that really emerged between you as you were speaking. According to your LinkedIn profile, you are a tech executive coach and facilitator with the intention of integrating psychological safety and inner work in ethical AI development. And you're also a musician, and we have a few mutual friends through the context of the work you do or did with Thomas Hübel. And yeah, it was pretty exactly 2 months ago that we had a conversation. We had a call, and I discovered many shared passions and alignment in our purpose and our practice as coaches. And back then I already had the sense that we should have recorded that conversation because there were so many interesting points in that. And so many perspectives that we touched upon that I was really happy when you agreed on recording this podcast session today. So here we are. Welcome, Max. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the invitation and also for the nice grounding. It felt really good to start in that way. Thank you.
In the grounding, I spoke of this space of possibility and letting go of some of the limitations that we're holding. So what would be the potential that would make your heart sing for this next hour, and what would support you in living into that potential?
Yeah, I think for me it's the first word that popped up in my mind was playfulness. Because for me, when I sense into possibilities, and also it's a lot of what I'm working with, it's really creating the possibility to play together. Yeah. So for me, this is what makes me super alive directly. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. And I think it's so important in the context of the world that we're living. And depending on which reality channel we're tuning into, there's so much seriousness, there's so much urgency. And I think this quality of play is so essential for what makes us human. So I align very much with that intention, and I'm happy to play with you and see where this non-directed and in a way free play guides us into this conversation. For me, one definition of leadership is to sense a quality that is missing in the field and to have the willingness to bring that into the space. And for you, I perceive that you are taking leadership for a very specific quality that bridges the tech world and specifically AI and the inner development of the humans that you're working with and that are working in this field. So I'm curious if you would share some steps along that path that took you there and the intention of moving into supporting the inner development in this AI space. What is it that excites you about this work and the field?
Yeah, no. It's interesting. I definitely feel I'm touched because I also feel I'm coming closer because this is really dear to me and dear to my heart. Yeah, I mean, first of all, I studied physics. I have a physics degree, and I studied physics because I was interested in consciousness. For me, this was always very obvious from, I think I was in 10th grade and I was in a physics class, and it was something that I felt, for me, exploring consciousness further and studying or in a scientific way was always the direction for me, was always physics. And it wasn't that obvious at the time, but now it became quite obvious through AI. And so this is one path. I think there's a lot of different things that happened in my life that led me to this specific point. For me, there's a huge potential in developing these systems right now. And also there's a process of, or a possibility for a process of birthing or supporting a birthing process of new consciousness into the world. And for me, it's really obvious that this needs more than only a technical understanding, and maybe also a philosophical understanding of the space. I think we need a lot more inner qualities as well. And that's something I feel very passionate about. I think there's some, we can speak more about this, but sensing into the field, being in touch with people that are creating that technology right now. It's like the new big thing. It's like a gold rush. And at the same time, it's also like a Cold War. So, or potentially there could happen some kind of Cold War. So it's there's so much energy in there, and it's so much pace in there. And I think to navigate some of the questions and to explore possibilities, to find answers, because we don't have answers for very important questions like the alignment question. How can we give the systems values so they serve life? And for some of these questions, for me, it's really obvious that we need to create cultures where people can show up and speak their truths, where people feel connected to themselves and others, where we can sense our needs, also our biological needs, our mental needs, like what, really this wholeness aspect of us being humans comes to mind. And I think in order for some of the biggest companies in the world right now that explore these topics or explore building, right now it's LLMs, building these large language models, I think this will become a crucial point. How is the culture in the company? How are people showing up? How fully can they be there? And I feel really passionate about this. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel a lot of gratitude hearing you share that, because I have a very limited insight perspective into what is happening in these companies. I only see what is happening on the surface in terms of the new releases and the models that are being developed. And my sense is that there is a big lack of exactly what you're describing, that there's so much competitiveness, that there is so much separation in the field, that you're bringing in something very valuable. And I'm very curious to explore that deeper. But before we go into that, I would love to hear it's been 2 months since we had our last call, and as you said, things are moving so quickly in that field. What is something that surprised you or that inspired you since we talked last?
I don't know if it was it in that time, but I saw that what is surprising to me to see is how quickly new companies arise. There's an example of a company in which is called Black Forest Lab. It's actually in Germany, which is very uncommon for AI companies or leading AI companies. And it's a few students, I think some of the former employees of Midjourney, which is the other big image generator or one of the best. And to see some people leave the company, go together with another, with a small group, and the small group can build some of the best image generator tech in the world right now. So what is true to, and what I'm seeing over and over, that really with limited resources and small teams, people can build very competitive systems, even in comparison to some of the wealthiest companies in the world. So for me, that's quite inspiring. And it's also, it's interesting to see. I feel some joy around that too.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, it points towards a great potential. Really, it's not so much about who has the most resources at the moment, but really other factors playing into that as well. And I'm also curious to explore what beyond the technical innovations might support these companies that are taking more space, or specifically in some of the niches can develop quite some influence. And in our last call, you shared how many people in the AI field are in this race, that it's an enormous pace in the way that money is flowing into that environment, and how people are under pressure to perform and to create results and new releases. And that if you talk to them behind closed doors, many of them admit that mental health is an enormous challenge to stay resilient in that field, and that also the pace leaves many important questions unasked that have potentially fundamental or even existential impact on our future. And so I'm curious how that has been unfolding, and where you see an openness to also turn inwards and not just focus on the next technological innovation, but also to bring more awareness, that inner dimension of the people that are in a way infusing their consciousness and their values into these technologies.
Yeah. I mean, you're speaking to something that feels very important for me in this space. And I think there's no, there's no clear answer on how to find a solution in a way there. Because what is true that is that the companies that push most are most successful right now in this space. And I think it's true for a lot of cases in the world. And for me, it's one of the most interesting questions is, how can a company that is, more ethically aligned, supports inner work, supports the well-being and mental health of their employees, can at the same time be competitive in this space? Because, just before I spoke about how small companies can become very influential, and that is very true. But at the same time, you need billions of dollars to build the best systems. And people won't use so much small systems that are not competitive. So really, we like to use the best systems when it comes to technology. It's the same, people buy Fairphone, but to what percentage? It's nice that it does exist. And for me, it's very interesting. How is that possible? Like, is it possible to build companies that have really strong values and that live that values, and at the same time be competitive? And for me, honestly, this might be one of the first moments, and also potentially one of the things that is drawing me to that field, because I don't think it's possible to solve alignment issues to a certain degree if you don't have a really conscious and new culture that, you didn't need to build iPhones or a tablet, but to align new consciousness I think so. So for me, there's a huge potential in that. And it's true. I mean, there's some scarcity of talent, which is also different than before. Or it's more obvious now. There's a small amount of people that are extremely good. They have very good intuition. They're really good in math or other specific things. And it's not like you can start a company and have enough money and you find 1,000 people, amazing people to join your company. That's not how the market is right now, which is also a bit different than before, I would say. So I think there is an awareness that it's important to take care of your people, and at the same time it's super high paced and they want to stay competitive. So it's not easy.
Yeah, and for me, since we're both working in the field of transformation, it's not about some cosmetic shifts to the existing system by saying, okay, we take care of our people so that they can then be more in performance, that they can be squeezed out more so that we can have more profit, so that we can be more successful. I think we're both sensing the potential for a deeper shift in how we humans relate to each other, how we relate to the world, and how we relate to technology. And obviously, it also shows again that what we're seeing in the field of AI is also very much mirroring the values of the capitalistic market system that we're having. And so there are certain limitations that are also imposed on these companies where they can, even if they wanted to act more ethically, had the challenge that you just described, that if they want to be successful, they need to move fast in order to be competitive with others. So it brings in some very inherent and complex contradictions in a way that even if individual leaders feel the impulse to come from a different place to implement new values, they are confronted with massive challenges. And interestingly enough, that is then also what the technology will be aligned with. One of these values that you also spoke of, the alignment problem, is mirroring, reflecting the existing system that we're in, and not one individual player can solve that challenge by themselves. It really requires a more collective awareness of what are we creating. And it again leads to the phenomenon that we individually or we collectively create results that individually no one really wants in some areas. So
Yes.
yeah, I think it's a very fascinating paradox.
Yeah, let me add on to this, because it's actually very interesting to see a lot of the, leaders in tech were at the point where GPT 3.5 came out. I think everyone was surprised how capable it was and how big the jump was. And a lot of people got really scared. And there was an initiative that a lot of people, including people like Elon Musk and other really big tech entrepreneurs, signed from the Future of Life Institute. And I think Max Tegmark was one of the co-authors. And it was on stopping the development for multiple months, which has never happened to my knowledge with any development before that we did in the tech space. Because people got really scared and they said, okay, we need to find some solutions and implementations. And it's quite clear, as you said, that, the market dictates that it is not possible for companies to just stop their development, even if it's really, if there's a huge existential risk, or we don't know that. But even if that would be the case, there's a good chance people wouldn't stop. And I think this is something that we don't understand as a society, what that actually means. Even if there's a 50% likelihood of systems that we create might kill us, a lot of companies would not stop because they would lose their agency or their power also to create something different, even if they were really into creating the best thing. Right now, also a lot of languages around, we are the fastest ones, and then we are the only ones who can dictate or say we make it safer. If you're a small company that has no impact, you can try to align your system, but it has no meaning to it, or not a lot of meaning to it. Yeah.
And I think we see that pattern in other industries as well, where there are individual players who are willing to sacrifice human life on the planet or even our future existence and destroying the planet if they can make a profit from that. But I think in the field of AI and these advanced technologies, it's even more pronounced. It's even more obvious how existential the threat and how quickly the threat could come upon us, and how these behaviors are somehow also posing very deep questions. And I like to always see these symptoms that we see also on a systemic level as an invitation from life to actually not just see it as a problem, but also as an opportunity, just as every solution of the past somehow becomes the problem of the future. I can see how the problem that we're facing now can also cause and lead us to a deeper step towards wholeness. That we are somehow not able to solve this problem with our old way of thinking, and that we are also confronted with the limitations of individual players and their agency, but we need to somehow come together in different ways as humanity to find solution for these global challenges, and not just climate change, but also I think technology is posing a big question for us as humanity, and who are we as one humanity. And so I'm curious to hear from your perspective, what is your hope for this field and what can emerge from that, and also the impact of your work in this?
What I'm doing right now is I'm doing interviews with a lot of different people in the industry, and I will be traveling to the US very soon, to also the Bay Area, to just sense and be around people and see how this field actually feels like. And my teacher, Thomas Hübel, that you mentioned before, he often speaks about space and how inner capacity in space has a huge impact and influence on systems, also on organizations. I have had images, just intuitively that came up in me of what would happen if it would be possible, to drop space bombs. Obviously not to destroy anything, but, just this image of what if there's like an entire area of the world where a lot of development's actually coming from right now. It's quite focused. If there would be more space there. And I think just the way as a lot of companies are looking at Apple right now, or Google, and trying to implement their systems, because there were definitely an evolutionary step from my perspective to, let's see what German. I just spoke with someone from Mercedes-Benz and their developmental. He has quite an important role, and I think is an amazing human being. I spoke with him about his perspective on their culture today in comparison, because I'm, and yeah, it feels like they cannot really build software products because on a certain way they didn't go through that evolutionary step, and they're not willing to do that. And so for them, it's not possible to, right now, it seems like, to build good software themselves. And I think for the next systems, there will be some, like a similar step is needed as before, from building cars to building software, it needs a completely new culture. And I think from building software to building aligned systems, AI systems, and there's like so much in that industry: robotics, cars, like self-driving cars, and so on. There's so many ethical questions also regarding that it needs a next necessary step to build systems that are actually beneficial. And my vision is to be part of that in every way that I can help and support, and also grow and evolve myself. Yeah, join that that movement and that development that wants to happen, and emergence there. Yeah,
I could very viscerally feel when you're speaking about space and bringing space into these organizations and how that would feel like. And there's something that really resonates very deeply about this, because I can feel that within that space, we can step back and detach a little bit from our identifications and our survival strategies that bring a lot of fear into these spaces. And so if we
Yes.
have more space, then we can see a bigger possibility and version of ourselves within that. And through that, we have more choice. We can choose which direction we want to go, and we have more possibilities to actually bring true innovation instead of following a certain track that is already predefined through our
Yes.
past strategies. So there's something very powerful about bringing in space.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel so too. Yeah, and also sensing into, feeling our bodies, just as simple as that, and feeling what we actually need. For me, it's very interesting how many companies are being built that need to create artificial needs to survive.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's always, I'm working, there's a method I co-developed with a good friend of mine, Josef Ronicke. It's called presence games, and it's a facilitation method where we create games out of our own needs.
Mm.
Um, and for me, it's like a good example of when we create something that we, like if there's a group of quite diverse group of people with diverse in their needs, I think this is really important then. And they come together and create something that they all feel is needed and they all feel included and welcomed. This potentially is a very powerful product. It's if it's serving a bigger group of people. And for me, it's a very similar thing of aligning the systems. That's, yeah, can be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you speak about creating artificial needs, what comes to mind is how much energy we're using as individuals and as humanity to fulfill these sort of surrogate needs that we don't really actually have, but somehow numb a pain and an emptiness that we have within ourselves. We replace the sense of connection with junk food, and we fill ourselves with junk food or cheap media and all these things in order not to actually go to the real need that is beneath that we're trying to numb away from, because it is made more accessible through the economy that we've created. We can buy these replacements that are in a way making us keep calling for more and staying hungry for the actual need that is never really fully met. And so becoming aware of that, I think, is a big part of that, and having the acceptance and the vulnerability, and then to look for true solutions that would actually fulfill that need. And if we then in turn also bring that in as a culture in an organization and decline it all the way through the products that they're creating. And if we transfer that to the field of AI, what would an AI look like that would actually fulfill true human needs? Because I see that there's massive potential for that, of supporting
Yes.
humanity in our next evolutionary phase. But a lot of the products that are being developed are just feeding these hungry ghosts that are creating more disconnection, that are creating more polarity, that are creating more distance from our true needs. So yeah, I feel the potential of what you're speaking into.
Yeah. I also just spoke on my podcast with a guy called Fionn Wright. And he, there's a lot of different things we explored, but one statement that he makes, I think is very powerful on how AI is influencing us, also in our development, and has a potential as to influence, because it's like something that we engage with, that we interact with, that we have conversations with, that we share our dreams with. Already today, that's the case. And that we get feedback from, and we give feedback too. So in both ways, there's like a development that is happening, and this is really powerful, and we should really take this serious. That these systems also inform us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it resonates with an idea that I heard Bayo speak about, I think even in your podcast, also Bashar, who's channeled by Daryl Anka, about the idea that somehow the name of artificial intelligence is a bit misleading, because the intelligence itself is not necessarily artificial. The devices that we're creating to tap into this intelligence, they might be artificial, but the intelligence is somehow an aspect of the universe that we can attune and align with. And so it points to a much deeper understanding of consciousness and intelligence. And I believe that every innovation that we achieve on a technological level is realized as an inner possibility first, that it needs to be a belief that is then manifested as a reflection on the outside. And so in that sense, technology as a permission slip for something that we have access to anyways, as a quality of consciousness, which leads to a very interesting point that I think you mentioned earlier as well. There's this quote by Arthur C. Clarke who says that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And so I think there's a big overlap of technology and spirituality. So how could AI point towards an overlap between those two so far very separate domains and bring new revelations about the existence of human consciousness and the overlap between technology and spirituality?
Yeah. It's interesting because I hear a lot of AI leaders, when people ask them about their dreams of an AI system, they speak about the perfect guru or an awakened teacher. And these are like some of the like very techy people. I think we're all seeking for answers and for truth and for what is real and what is important, what is life about. And there's also a deep longing for that in the tech field, and people want to build these systems actually out of that reason, because they feel lost or they want to have answers. So yeah, it was speaking a bit to your question, I think. Can you ask your question again? Because
I'm just curious about this overlap between spirituality and technology, because in many areas of life, spirituality is still somewhat of a taboo topic. But I think with the development of AI, it becomes more into our mainstream awareness that there is something that goes beyond the rational understanding of the world. And you, as a physicist, I think for me, if you look into quantum physics, there's no denial of the spiritual dimension of this world. And so I felt that with wise scientists like Einstein or Bohm, who had a deeply spiritual path and were coming originally from a very materialistic worldview and had this opening through physics, I think there was a potential of opening the world to a more spiritual worldview. And it hasn't quite landed in the way because it was maybe also too complex, too difficult for most people to understand. But I think with AI, there's another moment of a potential for an opening that opens us up to a deeper awareness of what it means to be human on this planet.
Yeah, I agree. I think also just talking about the fact that we might birth new consciousness right now into the world, and having these kinds of conversations is just was unthinkable 30 years ago to most people. And, talking about alignment and serving life and being beneficial. And, there's so many terms in that are becoming really mainstream right now. Or also talking about, wisdom imbued systems, trauma-informed systems, because a lot of that is very connected to a lot of spiritual traditions, and right now it becomes very important. And also how the nature of consciousness and these devices is has a potential to not be in one space or one body. You can have server farms all over the world where you train the data, and where this this is informed. So I think a lot of ideas of being very interconnected and these kinds of spiritual ideas or realities are directly part of the systems that we're creating right now. Yeah. So I think it's also true, like a lot of people I mean, this is also true for many years, but I know there's a lot of psychedelics that is used in California in the tech space as well. I think a lot of people are doing, journeys around that, and it's definitely inspiring also their work. I've heard quite a few stories around that.
Yeah. yeah, it almost sounds as if there's a certain convergence happening, that many different threads are pointing towards a similar assimilation point, where something is coming together that could have potentially very profound impact on
Yes.
the field of AI development, but then ultimately also on all of humanity.
Yeah, that is true. And really, I think what I spoke to earlier, I think the culture that we need to create really aligned systems that are beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
That is a huge step from where we are right now. Um, and if this is possible in one company, then this will be one of the most leading edge companies in the world,
Mm-hmm.
and the entire world will try to learn from that. And this is the example I wanted to make with Mercedes and Apple or Google
Mm-hmm.
before.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it's not so trivial to do that, having an existing old culture, but it becomes a focus point of orientation in the world. And
Mm-hmm.
right now, these focus points are Apple, Google, Microsoft, Amazon. Yeah, and I think like the biggest car manufacturers in the world are looking in that direction, and the banks are looking in that direction, and the real estate is looking in that direction. And it's like, this is one way
Mm-hmm.
of doing that. And I think if we create systems or cultures that have a next update and bring a next update, they have a big potential to do the same. And
Mm-hmm.
this really will influence every part of society.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. I think it's a super fascinating thought because we've seen in the recent future that companies that didn't exist have become market leaders very quickly and have had a very disruptive impact because of bringing obviously in some sort of a new operating system with which they're organizing themselves and therefore have higher capacities to develop things that traditional companies haven't been able to upgrade to. And yet I feel that there is something that wants to emerge that goes beyond just having more force pointing towards one direction. This upgrade also brings in something that has been, I think, very much found application in the spiritual domain when we look at intuition and wisdom, in contrast to just being smarter or working faster or more effectively. There's something
Yeah.
that doesn't just go vertically higher, but also has more of a holistic perspective on life that I can sense when I tune into this field of what could this upgrade in an organization be that could then potentially even impact the entire playing field, because I sense that many of the limitations that we currently have come from an extractive capitalistic market system that is very much based on competition, that is very much based on separation and being better than the other. And so I think that there's something around the way of collaborating and stepping into deeper service to the collective and to life that is related to this innovation. And one of the ways which I experienced that myself is through practices of, for example, the emergent listening in theory U or Boehm's dialogue, where coming together as a group of people and finding the alignment that you speak about and really accessing a higher intelligence that is moving through us that no individual in that group could have access to, but together we can become vessels for an intelligence to speak through us that is bigger than the sum of the parts. So beyond the artificial intelligence and creating technological devices, I think there's also a very interesting field of social innovations, of how we can come together to access this kind of information and create coherence within a group of humans. So I'm curious to hear your experiences or your perspectives on the potential of social innovations around that.
I think it's like one of the keys for me to create the other. I liked how you said, when it's not about being better, and it's also not about being alone.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Because I think this is very true, and actually feel some sadness saying this. I mean, I think it's fundamentally to develop more capacity to be in relation with other people and oneself. The horizontal that you were pointing to stay in relation in groups and be really curious about other people and what wants to come up in these spaces. I think that's this has a huge potential for innovation. And it's also something that I'm really curious about. Like I said before, was one of the performance presence games that I love to facilitate with. It's like one method that exactly it's like a bit of a combination of the work from Thomas Hübel and author Theorio Otto Schama that you were speaking about. That this came through and emerged as well. For me, it's really speaks to a big passion in me. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just pausing for a moment to tune into the potential of, wow, what would that mean if we create technologies that are in service to that really allow us to step out of the hamster wheel and of the strategies of our ancestors that define progress, that define what it means to move forward.
Yeah, and I find it interesting because to create the technologies, we need to be able to do that already. So it's not one thing happens before the other, or will imbue both. Probably both will imbue itself at the same time. But I think in order to create the technologies, we need to come together and listen to each other, and being able to listen to very different feelings and opinions that we experience ourselves and stay in relation with that. I think it's one of the questions with alignment is like we have very different ideas of how an aligned system would look like. And if you go to DeepMind or speak with people at XAI or Anthropic or OpenAI, what values or even go to Saudi Arabia, they're investing really, really heavily into AI, China, Russia, India. What an aligned systems and values mean is very, very different. And I think, reality is we will have really different aligned systems for different countries, for different contexts, probably for different political groups. But I think there's a huge potential to not go in that direction, to create a system that, very different viewpoints can come together and can exist at the same time. But this needs to happen and be experienced in social fields and organizations beforehand. And I think then there's a potential that companies might be able to create, or people might be able to create these systems and align them in a way that it doesn't need to exclude half of the population.
Right. Yeah, and I love what you say, that it needs to exist within us before we can implement it as a technology, or we can download it and access it as a technology. And the question to me arises is, does it need to be equally distributed in all of us, or is it enough if a few have the leadership capacity to have a very high perspective that then through AI can also be distributed more evenly, and can take a certain leadership role where AI in a way supports us in bringing down the highest wisdom, the highest possibility for us, and through the authority that is projected onto this AI by people who maybe not have the developmental capacity to see what is actually in our best interest, can align more with that leadership that happens through AI.
Yeah, maybe.
It's interesting. I was playing around with ChatGPT yesterday, and I was asking, can I talk to highly evolved extraterrestrial beings through you? And obviously ChatGPT said, no, I don't have access to that information, but we can hypothetically play that out. And I was like, okay, cool, let's do that. And I was asking a few questions. I didn't go very deep with it, but it was very interesting to see, what would a highly evolved species think about life on the planet and what would be some of the solutions. And the answers, just to say some bullet points, were embrace true presence, integrate rather than control, release ownership of outcomes, connect with life as a mirror. And I was really surprised, like, wow, cool. That's some really deep spiritual stuff that is coming through that is somehow condensed in that AI already. So I can see how AI could potentially also take some spiritual leadership if it's really an aligned system in our world.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and if it's aligned to that, but yeah, there's I mean, or ChatGPT was trained on, hundreds of thousands of books, and among them there's a lot of wisdom as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
So it really depends on what the LLMs are trained on and the prompts, the questions that you're asking that will then also bring respective outcomes. So yeah, it doesn't free ourselves from also applying our own intelligence and how we interact with that intelligence.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious to explore a bit more of the work that you're doing. You mentioned the presence game already. And for me, I call soul awakened leadership as a quality of being willing to go beyond separation and duality and beyond competition and pointing towards this potential, stepping into deeper service to life and letting go of our small identities that we created from the strategies of the past. So letting these strategies go requires also a certain vulnerability, and not to invest more of our energy into optimizing these strategies and moving into performance, but to overcome also the tendency to hide our weaknesses and to, as you also mentioned before, invest so much energy into the replacement needs instead of filling our real cups. So surrendering to the deeper guidance, what I want to acknowledge also from our last conversation is that I sense a very deep commitment and integrity in you to really be of service and to also be transparent about the impact of your work, because it's not always necessarily leading the people that you're working with to more success in their existing games, but it can also have a quite dysregulating impact. If we engage in true, authentic inner work and transformative work, it also requires of us to surrender and to engage in a certain death process that can also be destabilizing and have negative impact on the work that we're doing for some time at least. And on your website, you, instead of advertising more money or more success, faster results, or even impact, you use words like hope or optimism, resilience, and self-efficacy. So I'm curious, who are the people that are already ready to resonate with that, and what's the experience of working with these people for you?
Yeah. So for me, speaking of hope and resilience is also something that is really really a big question for me right now, sensing into Germany, for example. And I think this is true for most of Europe, also for big parts of the States, is our grandparents built after the war an economy that was one of the most successful ones in the world at the time. That is still really competitive and strong. There was a lot of hope for a brighter future, for, the sense, I think, from everyone was, so life is getting better. And speaking today with someone in a higher position at Mercedes, and having regular conversations also with people all over, is there's a lack of hope that is there. And if we try to create something from that place, or to, it's very hard to become an answer for the problems that are in the society if we don't feel any hope. If we don't have the sparks in our eyes and, the feeling of we can just show up and I can make a difference. And we can create something cool together and amazing that will flourish and, make people's lives better. I think there was a very different feeling to that in the past. And so for me, this is speaking of hope, is speaking of that spark,
Mm.
speaking of a fire you can lit up again or feel again and get excited, and for me, true innovation and really comes from that place.
Mhm.
So I feel very connected,
Mhm.
connected to it. Um, yeah, and the other thing, to be honest, is a question that I have. I have a lot of conversations with different people. I've worked um, with social activists before. That's also where this method was created together with Joseph. And right now in the AI field, it's a question that I have because for me, I'm also, I think, also money wise, you can make a very strong argument that it is good for the companies to do that kind of work. Um, and that's something that I'm honestly exploring with right now on, I don't need to hide that. I think it's true. Talent is like one of the most expensive things that is there right now. Getting the right people, and so funny that I'm making this example now. I was very anti or against soccer for a long time of my life, but I think it's there's like definitely players that decide to be part of a club because they feel comfortable and they feel like they can thrive there and have space and people are caring about them. And at some point, it doesn't really matter if you get 500,000 more or a million more. Um, and I do believe this is something that is happening right now in the AI space as well. There's a lot
Mm.
of people going away from OpenAI right now and going towards Anthropic, which is probably the AI company that cares most about safety and solving alignment. So, doing that kind of work and cultural work that I care about, I think will become also money wise one of the most important factors. And I truly believe that.
Mm.
Um, because you will lose otherwise your talent and people go away and they will go sick and of these factors that you have as well. And also what we spoke about earlier is if you don't have enough psychological safety, you don't have collective intelligence. If people
Mhm.
can't listen to each other, like it doesn't really matter how big your team is. If 5 people out of 10 don't speak their truths, then it's like you wasted so much potential and intelligence. So I can totally also relate to that fact. And the other thing you said is also true. If you go into certain depths in inner work, um, this will not lead directly to being faster.
Mhm. The next
um,
upgrade and expansion.
exactly. Um, yeah. So both is totally true. And right now
Mhm.
I'm exploring. I'm with different companies of what is that they need and how where there's capabilities and capacities. I'm going to Siemens next week, which is a very traditional German company. So I'm very curious to see.
Mm.
They're also creating some AI systems, and I'm very curious to see what wants to happen there, what is possible, how much space they have in the company, to actually look at certain questions. But I
Mhm.
think, there again, people are open to the way it's working now isn't really working. We
Mm.
need something new. Um,
Mhm.
and so, and they also sense that they don't feel hope, a lot of hope. You know, for
Yeah.
some people it's true, and also I hear a lot of voices of I don't know about the future.
Mm.
This felt different
Mhm.
at Siemens 30 years ago.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's a super interesting point because the other aspect of that is to really have a vision of where we're going. And I think for many people, also this material vision is coming to an end. That, as you said, for our grandparents or even our parents, it was very much about a certain level of material safety. But
Yes.
for many people, we have achieved such a high level of material abundance to some degree that it's not inspiring us anymore to create more of the same. And I think many of the political leaders that you see in the media, or even companies and business leaders, are somehow still holding on to a vision of let's go back to where we were 20 years ago. Well, let's go back to the level of employment and abundance that we had back then. But that's not very inspiring for many people who have also evolved in their values or in their sense of what is our contribution of our generation to the world that we're leaving to the next generation. So where the challenge of our parents was, how can we create a material base? I feel we're moving beyond that and looking into how can we create an inner space that is more fulfilling, that is more inspiring, that is more nourishing and more in alignment with our true soul's calling. And so if the highest vision that we're being presented is let's just go back to where we were, no wonder that many people don't believe in that anymore and don't really trust political leaders anymore, or how our political and economical institutions are hollowing out more and more. Like Eisenstein says, that many people are still following the rituals, but it's just an empty ritual and no one believes in it anymore. And work has become that for many people. Somehow we do it out of economic necessity, but not with the spark in our eyes of, wow, we're creating something for the next generation. And so I feel that if a company would actually step up to that possibility of creating a vision that is so inspiring that it transcends the material vision of humanity, I think that would also be a distinguishing factor in the current marketplace, because it transcends the current game and it invites a new possibility that people could actually care about, that people are actually excited about, because it brings a level of purpose and sparks a longing within us that many people actually, I think, have within themselves, even if they don't fully admit it yet, because there are very few leaders who speak into that vision, or who embody, as you say, who become that vision for others to align with.
Yeah, and I mean, what is also true is that for a lot of people, the vision is to have total abundance of materialistic. I think Elon speaks to this as well. And with it also comes, I mean, that almost everything will be for free and everyone can have everything of everything, which is interesting because this is what might actually lead to that we care a lot less about materialistic things at the end as well, or has a very good likelihood, because out of scarcity we want a lot of things, as we know. But yeah, so that's definitely a big vision for some of the AI leaders. And when they talk about vision, is that people don't need to work anymore and there will be abundance. And I think in that question, for me, it's very interesting because it might ultimately lead to the idea of, if we have everything, for a lot of people, that idea is dystopian. And I think it's dystopian because we don't know what purpose is anymore. Yeah. And so work is very related to purpose. And also how we are gonna be in community. Because I think for most, like, I don't know many people that say wearing like be in some virtual reality for their entire life is a utopia or a future to look forward to. I think everyone, when we speak of what makes us happy, we're in community, we are in nature, we sit around our friends, people are welcoming us, people are nice to us. So I think, that is also part of, but I think this is a collective responsibility that we have, and that is popping up with these questions. Like if AI takes away a job, it is also a possibility to think of what life is about. And at the same time, I don't want to put this in any way. I think this will be threatening for a lot of people's lives and their existence. And I don't want to make that away and that fear.
Yeah, I mean, from my own experience and my own journey of meaning making and finding fulfillment, I can say that I don't want to live in a future where I have more stuff that I don't need and where I don't have to work. I have my most fulfilling moments when I can feel that I'm in service and then I can contribute with the work that I'm doing that is purposeful. So I don't think that the highest human aspiration is to just eat junk food all day and to sit on a beach in an all-inclusive hotel where we're served by robots. I feel that there is a different potential for us really stepping into a deeper identity of what it means to be human. And I think more and more people are awakening to that, where they recognize we don't need that deep abundance of material bullshit. What is behind that is a deeper sense of safety that we get very much through, as you said, being connected in community and recognizing the interdependence of all life, of how we're part of a bigger whole that is embedded in other wholes where we are deeply immersed into the fabric of life that we are part of. And through that sense of belonging, feeling a sense of safety that goes so much beyond the material. And I think the vision of AI can support that, of not having to do a lot of the things that are just soul crushing and a lot of work that is inhumane, and take some of that away, but also pointing us to where we are needed, and really showing that there is a deep fulfillment in being of service to regenerating the human and more than human world that we in many ways also have degenerated.
Yeah, totally.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, you said you're in conversation with big companies like Mercedes and Siemens and also going to the US. What is the invitation with which you're approaching leaders in that world? And yeah, what is your experience of how they respond? You mentioned a few things already, but yeah, I believe that there's such a potential, of inviting people into more consciousness that are in positions of responsibilities, and yeah, inviting more consciousness into what they're doing.
I mean, what is true is that people feel a lot of times a lot of responsibility already. And this might also feel very heavy on their shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I have a lot of empathy with people that take on responsibility, that are leading in times of, not knowing. And part of that for some people is to pretend that they really know
Mm-hmm.
as a strategy. One of my teachers said I should just talk to anyone that comes around and be open and curious, and, fully show up myself and be curious about and listen to the other person. And so that's really what I'm doing. I'm just, wherever I'm going, if I'm sitting in a train, I was just going with the train to a holiday, and on the train ride I was sitting for 6 hours with someone from Google, and we just have had an amazing conversation. So it's really all places and spaces where I meet people, and writing people that I'm curious about and that I'm inspired about, and yeah, just being curious and ask them, listen to them, and see what their needs are and what their vision is, and of that, yeah, conversations start.
Yeah, it sounds like you're very much guided by the resonance and the openness, that you're also creating the space wherever you go and becoming that. What do you think is the most important quality of a leader in your field of work or in general?
There's really not one quality coming. I mean, if maybe it would be listening, but listening to life, to oneself, to others, and also the courage to act on that.
Beyond the context of the conversation that we've had so far, what is something that is on your mind these days?
What I feel very passionate about is something that we actually spoke a bit in just a few questions ago, is that meeting people radically where they are. When, maybe it's, I'll actually speak about presence games, because for me in the math, it really describes the way I'm also approaching the world. I'm thinking about things as it's basically a process, a gamification process where people create games. Groups come together, small groups. There's synchronization exercises, and people share about their needs. It's just the easiest example of how it's used. People share their needs, and out of their needs, they create a game together. And for me, really, what we are doing is also a game. We have a certain culture. There's a lot of rules that we haven't spoken about, but we both sense. For me, it's really interesting when the rules become more visible and touchable, and you can move with them. And you can see, oh, how does it feel if I'm going further away, if I'm coming closer, if we speak about topics that are not part of the space right now. We both sense they're not part of the space. So for me, that's part of being playful, and so it's like creating rules that serve our needs, also collectively. And one of the most important things for me in that is to be able to say no. And that's something that is fundamental for me also in doing inner works in organizations or companies, is I don't want that anyone can tell people you need to participate in this workshop, you need to share your feelings, you need to be vulnerable. For me, it's I love it when people say no. Because that's where they are, and I want to meet them there. But I want them to sense and be part of a community when they do so. So if people say I don't want to play this game, that's a rule in the game. They're a part of the game. And however they don't want to participate is part of the game. So it can be very interesting if people decide to sit outside and then they sit on a bench, and it's like, but the game will be around that. They will still be part of the community. And for me, saying no or having specific needs is beneficial. So bringing yourself in, it makes the game more fun. And because it's a game, everything is a lot easier, and you can talk about rules that you couldn't talk about in a normal work context. And for me, it's really that I'm working with a lot right now is when I'm talking to people that their safety is very dependent on financial success in their companies. And they do have values and they do care about values. But, if I'm taking their safety correctly, then maybe it doesn't make sense to speak with them about alignment at that point. And I'm trying to learn more about this, and at the same time staying true to myself, but really meeting people where they are, and don't put myself below or above them in that relation. And this in a playful context, see what I need to feel safe and alive, and then also for the others. These are the two parameters that I'm working whenever I'm doing any coaching or facilitation work. I'm always looking for what creates safety and aliveness, because both of them create a space where flow and playfulness arises. Yeah, that would be my answer.
Beautiful. I feel we're slowly coming to the end of the conversation, and I'm curious, what else are you working on at the moment, and how can people find more about you and your work? What's the best way to reach out?
Yeah, I mean, you can go onto my website, which is max-roth.com, and also check out the podcast on Spotify. I recorded a lot of episodes. I didn't have the time to put them up and do all the editing work, but they will come in the next weeks and months. Maybe you can link it somewhere. Evolving with AI. And if you're curious, you can totally text me on LinkedIn or on my website. I'm very happy to have a conversation.
Great. I'll link all of that in the show notes so that people have easy access to you. Is there anything else that's on your mind that you want to leave the listeners with?
No, I'm leaving very happy. Thank you for the invitation and this conversation, and your curiosity.
Yeah, thank you. I also feel really touched by this conversation. Really interesting points that sparked new ideas within me around AI, and I think it's so fascinating. I've been talking to people from very different fields in this podcast, and it feels that we're somehow, despite coming from very different directions, are somehow all allies for something much bigger that is emerging at this moment that we might not even be able to name, but there's something in that where I feel you very deeply as collaborating on a bigger emergence that wants to move through us and brings innovation through us into the world. So it feels really good to feel that support, to feel that allyship, and to feel your deep commitment to the truth that is alive in you. Thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Soul Awakened Leadership Podcast. You will find all the links and information on today's guest in the show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend who might benefit from the insights. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment or review on Spotify or any of the platforms. If you would like to find out more about my work or connect, you can visit jonathanklod.com, that is JonathanKlod.com, or find me at Jonathan Klod on Instagram or Facebook.